Good afternoon and welcome to Lunch with League. My name is Diane McNutt and I am president of League of Women Voters of San Jose, Santa Clara. We also serve the cities of Milpitas, Morgan Hill, and Gilroy. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization. Our purpose is to encourage informed and active participation in government and to influence public policy through education and advocacy. We do not support or oppose any political party or candidate. Being nonpartisan does not mean that the League is not active during election season. For the past few weeks, our members have been incredibly busy with candidate forums and voter registration and engagement events. We've also worked very hard on vote411.org, the online resource for voters that provides helpful information about what is on your personal ballot so you can make an informed decision. You can learn more about all of our election activities on our website, which is lwvsjsc.org. This month, we are pleased to present a very special Lunch with League program featuring our own pros and cons team. During each election cycle, the League prepares unbiased analysis of state propositions that will be on the ballot and offers educational presentations to community groups to help voters understand what is being proposed and what impacts they could have. Today's program will be led by one of our superstars, Martha Beatty. Martha has served as League President, Treasurer, Action Chair, and as Legislative Analyst and Policy Director for Open Government Bills. She's also Chair of Pros and Cons, and she will describe what propositions will be discussed today and introduce members of her team. Take it away, Martha.
Hello. We're glad to be here. I'd like to introduce my three speakers. Mary Collins, she is new to our team, but not to the League. Elizabeth Marquez Bernardino, who's new to both, and Vicki Muller-Olvera, who's an experienced team member. She's subbing for Kay Pomier, who is still recovering from COVID, which is really an unfortunate thing that happens these days. So I'm so sorry. We'll speak about three propositions. Please put your questions about all of them in the chat, and we'll discuss them at the end of the presentation. Okay. Come on. Okay. I want to just briefly say what are propositions and ballot measures. State propositions propose new laws for the state. They typically need over 50% yes votes to pass, and that's the case in all the ones that we have on the ballot this time. And they are put on the ballot in two ways. One is by the state legislature with a majority vote of the legislature, or if the proposition would change the Constitution or add a new tax, it must be 2/3 of the legislature must agree. And actually, that's the way that both Proposition 4 and 5 had to have the 2/3 vote of the legislature. And the other way is through the citizens and using the initiative process. They collect enough signatures and they're able to put it on the ballot. We don't have any local measures on this talk, but they are on your ballot. A lot of school measures in particular. So look for those too, and they can be put on the ballot by town or city or county council, school, special districts. Okay, my favorite slide, how to evaluate ballot measures. Examine what the measure seeks to accomplish. Do you agree with these goals? Is it good government, or will it cause problems needing court resolution? Does the measure mandate a government program or service without addressing how it will be funded? Does it create its own revenue source or obligate general fund revenues? If so, are these expenses that the state may have difficulty meeting in the short term? Does the measure deal with one issue that can be easily decided by a yes or no vote? Or is it a complex issue that should be thoroughly examined in the legislative arena? And consider whether a constitutional amendment really belongs in the Constitution. can a statute accomplish the same purpose? California has one of the longest constitutions probably in the world, at least in the United States, I know. And we just don't need that. And in order to get rid of anything in the Constitution, it has to go again to a vote of the people. And then be wary of distortion tactics and have here used in advertisements. And we really should add to that also social media. Okay, nonpartisan election information, and Diane mentioned this, vote 411. Do want to point out that all you do, it's the new version, or it's not a new version, but it's the new way that we are able to get information about our candidates. It used to be Voter's Edge, and before that it was Smart Voter. So you can look there, enter your address, and it gives your exact ballot. And you can learn about the candidates and a little bit about the propositions too. And then there's League California Education Fund, cavotes.org, gives you a lot of information about how to vote, but also about that you can go to download there the information that is the State League of California pros and cons that will give you information about all of the propositions on the ballot. And the other thing I want to point out is the voter's guide, which you've already gotten. On page 64 is the answer to one of the questions that came in ahead of time. And that is tell us about the votes, or about the bonds, California bonds. That's on page 64, and there's a whole page devoted to that. And so you can read it there. And okay, now, Mary, take over.
Thank you. I'm going to be talking about Proposition 4. It authorizes bonds for safe drinking water, wildfire prevention, natural lands, and issues related to climate risks. This is a legislative statute. A simple majority is needed to pass. So here's the question. Should the state of California issue $10 billion in bonds to fund state and local parks, environmental protection projects, water infrastructure projects, energy projects, and flood protection projects? So this is the actual question. Background. Over the last 30 years, $9.7 billion in state bonds has been approved for environmental purposes. Over the last decade, the state has spent about $13 billion annually on natural resources and climate activities. Of that, about 15% were funded from bond issues. As climate changes, wildfires, droughts, and other environmental disasters are increasing in frequency and in cost. Our infrastructure for safe drinking water and for clean energy requires significant upgrades. Due to cuts in the state budget this year, proposed plans have been cut or delayed. A big one was the California Climate Committee. The legislature, in order to support some of these programs, is supporting the issuance of bonds to fund projects related to these climate, water, wildfire, and energy concerns. And this does need voter approval. So what will the Proposition 4 do? It will allow the state to issue $10 billion in general obligation bonds. The proceeds would cover the issues we've mentioned before. The safe drinking water is the largest piece. Wildfire and forest resilience. along with extreme heat mitigation, another 2 billion. Protection of natural lands, parks, wildlife, some of them being repaired and some of them new. Protection of our coastal lands, our bays and our oceans as sea levels rise. And that's another 1 billion. Clean energy projects and green or safer agriculture.
Mary seems to have faded. I'm going to go on until she comes back.
Yes, I don't know what happened.
Yeah. The state expenditures would increase by an estimated $400 million annually for 40 years to repay the bonds. It's payable from general tax revenues, and it may offset some existing state and local expenditures.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
State expenditures will increase by 400 million annually for 40 years to repay the bond and interest. These payments come from the general tax revenues. This may offset some existing state and local expenditures if we solve forests by thinning out. We may prevent certain fires, so we may save that money that way. So some of the costs may be offset. And the funded projects may result in a reduction in cost of combating the environmental disasters. Okay, next. Let's see who the supporters are. The top supporters are Clean Water Action, CAL FIRE firefighters, the National Wildlife Federations, Community Water Center, the Nature Conservancy, and the Coalition for Clean Air. The top opponents are the Senate Minority Leader Brian Jones, and Assembly Member Jim Patterson, and the President of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. The arguments for and against. The supporters say we need to help communities adapt right now. We can't wait until our budget is balanced again. So we need to act to solve climate change and reduce climate pollution right now. This problem it can't wait until it's convenient into the budget. Therefore, we'll use a bond to fund it. Proposition 4 makes urgent investments to protect our communities, our health, our economy, and our natural resources. It will help clean up our water supplies. I just heard a thing about Oakland schools and the lead in their schools as an example. To prevent wildfires, protect our forests, our beaches, and wildlife habitat. The opponents say these bonds are going to be paid by people decades from now that didn't get to vote for their authorization. Bonds are the most expensive way for a government to fund actions, since you're paying the money back with interest. Prop 4 will add $10 billion in debt to taxpayers, plus an estimated $9.3 billion in interest over the years. Prop 4 is a reckless increase in state debt with questionable benefits. The top donors are mostly environmental groups: Save the Redwoods League, Semper Virens Fund, California State Parks Foundation, Local Conservation Corps, the John Muir Land Trust. There are also about another 8 have added in with an additional $53 million in contributions. There were no contributions recorded for opposing. So in general, for this bond measure, a yes vote means the state could borrow $10 billion to fund various activities aimed at conserving natural resources, as well as responding to the cause and effect of climate change. No, the state could not borrow 10 billion funds for these activities. Thank you very much. We'll have questions at the end.
Okay, Elizabeth is on.
Thank you, Martha. Hi, everybody. My name is Elizabeth, and I will be talking about Proposition 5, which would allow local bonds for affordable housing and public infrastructure with a 55% voter approval. It is a legislative constitutional amendment, and it would require a simple majority, which is 50% plus 1 to pass. So the question is, should the voter approval threshold for local bonds for affordable housing and public infrastructure be lowered from the current 2/3 or 66.7% to 55%? So what is the current situation? So bonds are a way for local governments to pay for large projects. They borrow money and then repay it plus interest over time, similar to the way a family pays off a mortgage on their home. Bonds allow governments to spread costs over a few decades. The California Constitution has rules about what approvals are required for a local government to authorize a bond. These were passed as part of Prop 13 in 1978. Specifically, there is an article within the California Constitution that states most local bonds and related property taxes require 2/3 voter approval. There is a limit on the property tax to repay a bond of 1% of the property value. Local bonds for schools require 55% voter approval as of November 2000. Property taxes to pay for bonds are limited to 1% of the property value except for school bonds. If a bond is issued at the state level, it requires a simple majority approval, 50% plus 1. California currently has $350 billion in outstanding debt, of which $80 billion is state debt and $270 billion is debt for cities, counties, schools, universities, and other agencies. From 2012 to 2022, the state has issued $23 billion of debt per year. Local entities, cities, counties, schools, etc., have issued $53 billion of debt per year. So moving on to what the proposition will do. So Prop 5 would lower the approval threshold to 55% for local bonds for affordable housing and public infrastructure projects. Affordable housing is defined as housing developments or portions of housing development that are affordable to individuals, families, seniors, people with disabilities, veterans, or first-time homebuyers who are lower income households or middle income households earning up to 150% of county-wide median income, as those terms are defined in state law. Affordable housing also includes down payment assistance programs, first-time homebuyer programs, permanent supportive housing, and facilities used to serve residents of affordable housing. Examples of infrastructure projects paid for by local governments include roads, bridges, public transportation, hospitals, libraries, police and fire stations, parks and green space, water treatment and sanitation facilities, emergency preparedness, and flood control. Prop 5 would require specific accountability measures for these bonds, such as a citizens oversight committee and an annual independent financial and performance audit. Prop 5 would allow local governments to assess property taxes above the 1% limit to repay these bonds. The state constitution limits, with narrow exceptions, the property tax rate to 1%. This 1% limit would no longer apply to new housing or infrastructure bonds. Prop 5 would allow retroactive approval at 55% for any local bond measure on the ballot this November 2024. If this measure passes, it would apply to local bond measures that are on the current November 2024 ballot, such as the Sunnyvale bond for a new public library. So what will Prop 5 cost? There is no direct cost associated with Prop 5 because it is not a tax or a bond. Prop 5 changes how bonds are approved. However, Prop 5 does increase the likelihood that bond measures will be approved, which would increase property taxes in the communities that approve new bonds. The Legislative Analyst Office estimates that in recent elections, 20 to 50% more bonds would have passed with this new threshold. A lower voter approval requirement could also result in local governments proposing more bond measures. So moving on to the top supporters and the top opponents of Prop 5. So the top supporters of Prop 5 are the president of the California Professional Firefighters, the president of the League of Women Voters California, the chairperson of the Habitat for Humanity California, the president for League of California Cities, the president for the Middle Class Taxpayers Association, and the president of the California Nurses Association. I do want to note that the list, as I mentioned, includes the president of the League of Women Voters California, who is acting in the role of action and advocacy. Moving on to the top opponents, it's going to be the president of the California Taxpayers Association, the president of the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce, the advisory member of the Women Veterans Alliance, the president of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, the chairman of the California Senior Alliance, and the president of the California Consumer Advocates for Affordability and Safety. So now that we know who the top supporters and top opponents are, let's move on to what supporters and opponents are saying. So as a disclaimer, these statements that I'm about to read are from top supporters of Prop 5, top supporters and opponents of Prop 5. So as the audience, we need to be aware that these statements are coming from people who want Prop 5 to pass or to not pass. So they are putting their best arguments to convince you to vote for or against Prop 5. These are arguments made by advocacy groups, and they may or may not be true. So what supporters are saying? Prop 5 is not a bond or a tax. It makes it easier for local voters to approve local bonds. Prop 5 would give local communities more tools to make housing more affordable. And Prop 5 would trust local voters to prioritize infrastructure projects that are most important for their communities. And qualifying bond measures must meet strict accountability requirements. What opponents of Prop 5 are saying are that it makes it easier to approve bond measures and increase bond debt. California already has more than $500 billion in state and local debt. More debt will mean more property taxes, higher rent, and higher prices for everything we buy and use. Prop 5 defines infrastructure so broadly that it can include just about anything. And Prop 5 would allow retroactive approval. Local bonds on the November 2024 ballot will pass with 55% approval. So moving on to campaign finance, starting with the top donors supporting. So for top donors supporting, there have been a total of 91 contributions made as of September 28th, 2024, which have contributed to a total of approximately $10 million. And the top donors supporting are the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative Advocacy, Yes on 5, the NPH Action Fund Political Issues Committee, and NPH stands for Nonprofit Housing Association of Northern California, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, the Crankstart Foundation, and 3 contributors at $100,000 each. Moving on to the top donors opposing, there have been 3,532 contributions made as of September 16th, which have totaled to a bit over $30 million. And the top donors opposing are the California Association of Realtors, the National Association of Realtors, the California Association of Realtors Issues Mobilization PAC, the California Business Roundtable Issues PAC, and the California Business Properties Association Issues PAC. So bottom line, A yes vote voting yes would mean that the voter approval threshold for local housing and infrastructure bonds would change from 2/3 to 55%. Bottom line, voting no means that the voter approval threshold for local housing and infrastructure bonds will remain at 2/3 or 66.7%. Thank you.
Okay, Vicky, you're on.
You're muted.
Y'all hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to talk about Prop 36. It's an initiative statute and it requires a simple majority to pass. It allows felony charges and increases sentences for certain drug and theft crimes. So the question we'll be voting on is, should California increase penalties for some theft and drug crimes, allow a new class of crime called treatment mandated felony, and require courts to warn people that they could be charged with murder for drug crimes that kill someone. So a little background. Okay, so punishment depends on the seriousness of a crime and criminal history. And a felony is the most serious crime, and people are sentenced to county jail or state prison or supervision by a county probation officer instead of serving some or all of their sentence in jail or in prison. So sentences can also be lengthened due to details of a crime. Okay, a misdemeanor is a less serious crime and people can be sentenced to county jail, county community supervision, and or fine for misdemeanors, and sentences can be up to 1 year in jail. Okay, so in 2014, voters passed Prop 47 by 60% of the vote. The purpose of 47 was to tackle prison overcrowding and reduce nonviolent offense incarcerations. So putting 47 in context, this was before the peak of the fentanyl drug epidemic of 2016, and it was pre-COVID, right? So Prop 47 changed some theft and drug crimes from felonies to misdemeanors. Shoplifting or stealing items worth $950 or less from a store and drug possession became misdemeanors. So Prop 47 also provides funding to public agencies to support mental health services, substance use disorder treatment, and diversion programs for people in the criminal justice system. So a little bit more background. In the last 2 months, Governor Newsom signed 11 bills into law intended to make it easier to prosecute retail and vehicle theft without undoing Prop 47. So these bills crack down on the theft and sale of stolen items. They increase enforcement and prosecutions. They combine values to meet felony thresholds, even across different victims and different counties, to meet the threshold for felony grand theft. They target organized theft, smash and grabs, car theft, car break-ins, cargo theft, and large-scale felony property theft crimes. So these changes are a shift in California's approach to retail crime and property theft, and provide law enforcement and prosecutors with more tools to combat these offenses. And these bills will all take effect in January. So let's talk about the proposal. Prop 36 makes several key changes related to punishments for theft and drug crimes. Okay, it increases punishment in 3 ways. First of all, it turns some misdemeanors into felonies. So these changes undo some of the punishments reductions of Prop 47. Okay, it lengthens some felony sentences, and it requires some felonies to be served in prison. So sentences for selling certain drugs, such as fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, or methamphetamine, can be lengthened based on the amount sold. So currently, these sentences are served in county jail or state prison, depending on the person's criminal history. But Prop 36 requires these sentences to be served in prison. Number 2, it creates a new treatment-focused court process for some drug possession crimes. So Prop 36 allows people who possess illegal drugs to be charged with a treatment-mandated felony instead of a misdemeanor in some cases. So this applies to people who possess certain drugs and have 2 or more past convictions for some drug crimes, such as possessing or selling drugs. So these people would get mental health or drug treatment, and those who finish the treatment would have their charges dropped or dismissed. But those who don't could serve up to 3 years in state prison. So this change also undoes some of the punishment reductions of Prop 47. The third thing that Prop 36 does is it requires courts to warn people that they could be charged with murder if they sell or provide illegal drugs that kill someone. So now let's talk about the fiscal effects. So at the state level, Prop 36 would increase criminal justice cost because it requires some people who now serve their sentences at the county level to serve them in state prison and lengthen some prison sentences. So in total, the prison population could increase and it's estimated to be around about 2,000 people. Prop 36 would also increase the state court workload. So this increase would likely range from the several tens of millions of dollars to the low hundreds of millions of dollars annually. At the local level, though, Prop 36 would also increase criminal justice costs. So in some ways, Proposition 36 would reduce the jail and community supervision population because some people would go to state prison instead of county jail, but in other ways it would increase this population because some people would spend more time in county jail or on community supervision. So overall, Prop 36 would likely increase the county jail population, and this increase also would be around a few thousand people. So Prop 36 would increase the workload for local prosecutors and public defenders. Also, the treatment mandated felonies would increase workload for some county agencies such as probation or behavioral health departments. So in total, the local criminal justice cost would increase by tens of millions of dollars annually. Also, let's note that Prop 47 created a process by which state savings from its punishment reductions must be spent on mental health and drug treatments, school truancy and dropout prevention, and victim services. So these estimated savings totaled $95 million last year. So by undoing parts of Prop 47, Prop 36 reduces the state savings from Prop 47. So let's talk about who supports this. So supporters include the Chief Executive Officer of the California District Attorneys Association, the founder of Crime Victims United, and the president of California Small Business Association. Opponents who signed their name to this ballot label include the district attorney of Contra Costa County, a retired police chief of San Diego, and victim advocate Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. So making their case, supporters are saying that tougher law will make our community safer and that Prop 36 is a targeted response to rampant theft and drug trafficking in California. But opponents argue, wait a minute, this proposition doesn't really provide solutions for retail theft and fentanyl problems. They argue that it reignites the failed war on drugs by making simple drug possession a felony. And this measure will send thousands of people to state prison. So let's follow the money. Supporters have raised more than $10 million from 409 contributions as of September 16th, with Walmart, Home Depot, and Target being the top 3. Opposing donors have raised over $1.6 million from 22 contributions in the same time period. Patty Quinlan, Stacy Schusterman, and SCIU, California State Council for Working People, are in the top 3. So bottom line, what does a yes vote mean? A yes vote supports making changes to Prop 47 approved in 2014, including classifying certain drug offenses as treatment mandated felonies, increasing penalties for certain drug crimes by increasing sentence lengths and level of crime, requiring courts to warn individuals convicted of distributing illegal drugs of their potential future criminal liability if they distribute deadly drugs like fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine, and increasing sentences for theft based on the value of the property stolen. And a no vote means that punishment for drug and theft crimes would remain the same. And that's Prop 36. Thank you.
Do you want to take it away?
Oh, okay. So yeah, so you're all here because you care about voting, and I know you're gonna do it. Just real quick, you should have already received your ballot in the mail, and you're gonna fill it out. You can drop it in the mailbox. If you want to make sure you sign it and date it. That's the mistake that that's the biggest mistake that most people make. They forget to do that. Also, too, if you want to turn in somebody else's ballot, you fill out this part right here, and you can turn in every ballot in your neighborhood if you want to. All right, thank you so much. Oh, wait, not to forget, we have Easy Voter Guides. EasyVoterGuide.org. Go there for all things voting, and you can even listen to it if you are visually impaired. Thank you so much for listening to me. That's all I got.
Okay. Okay, well, I'm probably muted. Huh? Okay, I guess I'm not muted. Okay. So we're ready to take some questions. We actually only have 2 in the chat. So if you want to raise your hand on the raise hand little thing at the bottom of my screen, I think some places they're on the top. You can do that. Do want to point out on Vicky's, we do have a table that compares the Prop 36 to the new bills, and that will be sent out when Carol sends out the link to, I think it's the link to the recording later. So, okay, so in the chat we have, oops, I went to,
A fiscal question, Martha. I could answer that one.
okay.
So what are the fiscal downsides of issuing bonds? The biggest downside is that it requires repayment with interest. And sometimes that over the 30, 40-year period, it doubles the actual cost of the initial purchase. So something was going to cost $100 million. With the interest over time, it gets close to $200 million. But the plus is, if you couldn't afford it now, it allows you to start paying.
Yeah, it's like a mortgage, you know, you can't
Yes.
necessarily afford the whole thing right at the first. So there are the fiscal upsides and downsides of issuing bonds. And the other question that's come in, does the league have a position on Prop 36?
Okay.
Well, Gloria, this is from Gloria Leventhal. I don't know, because I don't look at the league recommendations until I'm finished with all of my presentations. And so I will be happy to look at it then. You can look at it if you go to lwvc.org now, and it does tell you, it says vote with the league on it, and that will tell you. I think it's also on our website, but I just don't, I don't like to pay attention to that because it's not helpful to keep me honest and unbiased. Okay, now, are there any other questions that we have? I hope that there are more questions. We still have 20 minutes to go. Carol, you would be the ones, okay, please. Okay. Please amplify the analogy between mortgage and bonds. Well, you would apply for a mortgage to help you pay over time what you'd have to pay, what you'd have to pay all at once. And so instead of paying it all at once, you are given the privilege of paying over time, but the person that gives you this mortgage wants to earn some money as a result of that, because they would have to upfront the money to you, but then they'd have to, they'd have to actually have the cost of that. And so their cost is what they're charging you. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm very good at that. Don't do many mortgages. It's just sort of.
Yeah, Martha, it's taking out a loan. And
Yes.
when you have a loan, you have to pay it back with interest.
Right. Thank you, Mary.
Someone had asked, I thought about how much debt, didn't you put it in the mails? How much debt was the state of California in right now?
Yeah, well, it was, yeah, and that should be on page 64 of the California. I don't have it that memorized. I know that R2, one of them is 400 million over what Mary presented was 400 million over 40 years. And so each annually, and the Prop 2 is also a bond and for $10 million, and it's 300 million over 35 years. So, but overall, let's see if we get just page 64. I'm not open to 64. So,
Well, you're finding it.
Awesome.
I looked up
Yes.
the legislative analyst says there's a $73 billion debt for 24-25.
Right. Okay, and I just dropped into the chat, the LAO's state bond debt for 2024 for this ballot. So you can check that out. It's a one pager, and yes, it's a little cheat sheet. It should be in your chat.
that's the LAO for what, Vicky?
For the 2024 ballot. So there's
Yeah.
2 bond measures. I think it's, what is it, 2 and 4 or something like that? Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
All right.
I see a comment from Ann Clark. I can respond to it.
Okay.
She says it's useful to point out that bonds can only be used for capital improvements for things that will last while the bond is being repaid. And while that's in theory and is correct, that is what should happen, the opponents argue that that's not what's happening. Some of the money is spent on short-term things. So you are right. In theory, a bond is used to pay for a road that'll last for 30 years, to pay for a bridge that'll last for 30 years, pay for a school that'll last for 70 years. So that's the theory behind it.
And that
And that's why we love Ann Clark too.
right.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah, but that has been a contention of some of the bond issues that come up, because the more detailed they get into the projects, which take up an awful lot of text in the back of your voter's guide, with all these projects, some of them say that's not a long-term one, and so there's quibbles about that. Is this a long-term one, and should it be part of a short-term solution? I think that one of the is it on Prop 2 that one of the opposing arguments does say that some of these are not going to last that long, even that that you have voted for something, or you have you're paying for this thing 35 years later, but you're not even getting any benefit from it because it's gone by then. So that's something that affects some people's way they vote. So what's the best way to find out about donors for and against propositions? We do have the donors are on the California site, and it's what is it? I'd have to go back to should I go back to that? I can screen share and go back to that.
Yeah, we go to Power Search.
It's Power Search. Okay. So let's see if I can get back, go back to my share. Okay.
We got all our financials from Power Search.
Okay.
SOS.ca.
Go back to the beginning. Okay. So if I can get back to the beginning, I don't want to go through this whole thing, but that's probably the easiest way for me. Okay, I got it.
We get our information from the legislative
Right,
analyst
okay.
office.
powersearch.sos.ca.gov. And then if you say advanced, my little screen thing is in the way, advanced.php. Mine is sort of bookmarked by now because I go there a lot and look to see, because we stopped updating as of the 16th of November, or 16th of September. And so sometimes you want to look and see, I wonder if there's a whole lot more. And I know that there are a lot more under Prop 36. I read that, and so I wanted to see if it was a really big difference in it. That there's a lot more under the no portion of Prop 36. And they're mainly the same donors who have just increased what they are saying. I looked at that yesterday and said, well, so that's not going to make a difference really in who you're thinking about is supporting and opposing. So, okay, so stop the share again. Was everybody able to get a picture of this or find out what it says here so that you know where to go to
There was
look
one
that
more,
up?
there was one more question, Martha, that I looked up, just looked up the answer.
Okay,
They wanted to know what percentage of this,
of the budget.
wanted to know what the total California expenses or debt was or whatever. I just looked it up and it said in 2023, it doesn't have the 24 statistic. The California was $3.598 trillion in its domestic product. It was the largest of any state.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess they're saying comparing the debt to that.
They say, I mean, the bond debt is, according to our overview, is 3% of the state's annual general fund revenue, which is lower than the historical average of about 4%.
Okay, that's probably what they wanted.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if they've ever, I mean, the legislative analyst, that's a hard question for anybody to answer, I think. Maybe, I mean, budgeting people certainly can. And Clark, if you have if you know of something that's sort of an overall recommendation, please let us know. But I don't know that we actually have that answer to that.
Mhm.
Where is the Easy Voter Guide? If you go to
So the cheat sheet shows that bottom line, the two bonds, it says the cost to repay both bonds would total about 900 million each year, which is about 1/2 of 1% of the state's annual general fund revenue. So
Right.
that's for the two. They're on the ballot this
right.
year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The Easy Voter Guide is on, Carol just put the link in there. If you go to cavotes.org, then you can get it directly. But if you go to cavotes.org and look at all of their good information about how to vote and so on, then they will direct you to a menu item that says ballot measures. And then on ballot measures, it talks about how to get not only the Easy Voter, but the full-blown one of LWVC, which is longer, more like the presentations we gave today. So that could be helpful to you. Okay. So
Okay.
I was expecting a lot more questions than that, but we certainly don't have to. There's one new one here. Okay, Anne is answering back. She doesn't think there's any recommendation, at least that she knows of. it's up to the voters, what they can tolerate. If these are important, I think that, you look at the pros and cons and you see, the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association is going to tell you that no bonds are the best way. 0% of the budget. Okay. So, Carol, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Wait a minute, let me get my,
Get your face
Video.
on there, huh?
sorry, I've got, yeah, too many Zoom things going on right now. Yes, I just want to make sure that I thank all of you. I am always in awe of everyone who's who does all this research every year to learn so much about the ballot measures. It is just so impressive, and I just want to thank all of you. I'm Carol Watts. I'm vice president of this organization and also the co-chair of the membership committee. And I wanted to, thank everyone for coming. And I also want to announce that next month, our third Thursday Lunch with League program is on November the 21st. And we're pleased to welcome Neil Chase. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Cal Matters. Other positions, he was formerly the executive editor at the Mercury News. Cal Matters is a nonpartisan and nonprofit news organization in California. Its mission is to improve California's democracy by making its government more transparent and accountable and giving Californians the information they need to understand and engage with the government. They also have a voter's guide where for this the upcoming election, which looks like it covers only statewide contests and propositions. You can see them at calmatters.org. So
Carol, we use that a lot because they're one of these early participants, even when the ballot measures themselves are still just in public display form. Cal Matters has something about it, whereas the California Budget and Policy Center that I love to rely on also doesn't come out until I say, why didn't you come out sooner? I've got the analysis all done. Now I have to change things, so you have to do things like that. So yeah, the Cal Matters is a good source to go to. So that I'm glad we're having that speaker. Yeah.
Yes, I think he should be quite good. We're looking forward to hearing his perspectives about covering, the November election and other issues. So thanks again for participating.
Beyond that, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So thanks to everyone for attending today.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Happy voting, everybody.
Right.